Hello, this is Artemis_anime, and today I'm reading Chapter 12, Confusion and Lies of Veridian by Silver Mist Anime Lover. I hope you enjoy. Izuku sighed as he took a sip of his sake. He was poring over a couple of cases he was working on as Veridian. Just because he got hurt didn't mean he was going to completely stop working. He just couldn't go out on patrol yet, was all.
Viridian Chaos. Hey, Masa. I think I've got something. I'm going to shoot you an encrypted email with my findings. Here. Could you just try to make the code solvable for me, would you? I don't want to have to go to Nezu again. Viridian Chaos. That was such an easy code, though. Fine. I'll send you the cheat sheet on a separate server. Period. Thank you.
Hey, I brought you some. Kaiga stopped mid-sentence as he stared at the sake bottle. How did you buy that? You're 15! I'm physically 15. I'm actually around 44. Izuku smirked as he went for another drink. Your physical body would appreciate a working liver. Kaigo snatched the bottle before Izuku could drink anymore. The vigilante pouted. Aw, but I just started. Too bad. You'll wait till you're of age, like everyone else in this country. I mean, technically, time travel doesn't count. Kaigo crossed his arms. Time, you're like the mother I never had, Izuku chuckled as he ran a hand through his hair. He grimaced at the greasy feel. I need a shower. Alright, come on then, back to my place. Huh? You heard me. You need a shower, and you need your injuries looked at. Fine. Izuku relented, grabbing his overnight bag. He was barely used to staying over at Kaigo's place by this point. You know, Kaigo tilted his head, you could totally move in with me. I mean, teachers know we're good friends, and no, not only would that paint a really big target on you and your agency, but it would also call up questions about my home life I'd rather not answer. Izuku rejected immediately. Besides, there's no guarantee I'd even be allowed to live with you if they knew. I suppose that's true. What if I worked out the paperwork on my end first? Kaigo brightened again. Kai, Izuku groaned. Why couldn't he just drop it? Izuku liked being alone. I'm a grown adult of nearly half a century. I think I can live alone, yeah? I mean, legally, Kaigo smirked as he held up the sake bottle. You can't even drink. So, I hate you. No, you don't. He walked, bemused, as Izuku gathered his papers and stuffed it in his worn, rescued duffel bag. Oh yeah, there's a new video of Veridian circling the web. It's super popular, too. Oh? Izuku was only half paying attention. Yeah. Remember when you told that kid you were quirkless? Izuku dropped the book he'd picked up. What? Kaigo handed him the phone. Turned it out, the entire conversation had been recorded, and it went viral. The world knows you're quirkless. Veridian, the quirkless vigilante. Kaigo chuckled. How is this funny? Izuku stared at his friend in disbelief. I mean, now they know. They'll underestimate you, Kaigo finished, making Izuku pause. They'll underestimate you since nobody's really seen how well you can fight. They think you're just really good at staying hidden. You're the most elusive vigilante, not the most combative. The villains will get complacent. Maybe the League will even reach out to an offer to you, believing you'll be closer to them than a hero. Izuku mulled over his friend's words. If the League of Villains comes to me, then you can kill Shigaraki, Kaigo nodded. But you damn well better have me on stand-up by for backup if shit goes south, you hear me? Promise, Izuku grinned. Izuku sighed as he walked down the street. He was staying at Kaigo's for the moment, but the hero had some other shit to do, like work. Unfortunately, he was just as bad at adulting as Izuku was, so his fridge was practically empty, sans some 10-day-old chicken. Izuku was not going to touch that. So here he was, grocery shopping with the money Kaigo had left him for this express purpose. He decided to swing by the mall for once, just to browse. He was looking over some interesting books on coding when a massive explosion shook the building. People started screaming, and Nezu quickly found a bathroom to change into his Veridian outfit. Call him paranoid, but he carried it everywhere with him, specifically for circumstances like these. He climbed up into the air shaft, ignoring the way his healing injuries protested. He was fine. It was just some broken ribs and a concussion, and a partially disintegrated shoulder. Whatever. Point being, he was fine, and he sure as hell wasn't going to sit by while a mall was attacked. He eyed the situation from the shaft he was hidden in. 3 visible villains, all male. Wait, he knew these guys. They had a criminal record. They were called the Crystal Thieves because of the barrier quirk of the youngest brother. He could create a near impenetrable barrier around a relatively small area. It wouldn't cover the whole mall, but it'd cover enough to trap a good number of people. Nobody in or out without his permission. Drawbacks included unable to move while active and unable to lose concentration lest the whole barrier come tumbling down. Second brother had a mild fire-type quirk. He could heat his hands up until they were as hot as molten lava, allowing him to burn through walls and saves with ease. Drawbacks include a rather long cooldown time, so he had to be careful of what he touched. Plus, only his hands and lower arms were fireproof, so if he accidentally hit himself, he could cause some serious burns. The eldest brother would be the biggest challenge, though. He had a psychic-type quirk, a rather strong form of telekinesis that he had excellent control over. He could lift multiple objects, or people, at once, but his weight limit directly translated to his muscle mass. He could probably lift a few 100 pounds, though. Drawbacks include headaches and nosebleeds if he overuses his quirks or surpasses the weight limit. Veridian needed to get at the youngest, but the oldest brother would protect him. With a quirk that would stop a bullet or people mid-action, he was the ideal defender. The vigilante pulled out his phone, making sure it was on silent.
Viridian Chaos. Guys, we've got a situation. Fury, if you mean the mall, we already know. Are you going to join us? Viridian Chaos. About that. Shadow Slayer. You're already inside, aren't you? Knowing your luck, you were inside when the attack started. Meh face. Viridian Chaos. We have a winner! Smiley face. Emoticon. Aizawa. Be careful. It looks like the work of the Crystal Thieves. Viridian Chaos. Oh, it is. I've got visuals on them right now. Here's the plan. I'll find a way to take out the youngest brother, the one making the barrier, and you guys come in the first chance you get to back me up. Sound good? Fury. I really wish there was another way around this. Aren't you still injured? Shadow Slayer. He is. Worst of it's his arm and some busted ribs, though. Please be careful, Viridian Chaos. I'll be as careful as I can be. I'll survive at the very least. I'm too stubborn to die. That's all. Don't we know it? Your strength is your stealth. Use it to your advantage. Viridian Chaos. I love that you tell me how to do my thing when I was able to outrun you for over a year. That's all. It was only 6 months or so. Viridian Chaos. You never caught me, so I'm still free. A year and counting.
He slipped his phone back into his pocket. He had to be careful. They'd rounded up the hostages, and Coals for Brains was looking pretty heated. Veridian didn't like the way he kept looking at the woman, or the way his hands twitched when he looked at the men. He didn't have much time to come up with a plan. He would just drop down, because Psychic Boy would shut him down pretty fast. But if he couldn't see what he was doing, Veridian grinned as he silently scampered off to prepare for his plan. Kaminari Denki had been hanging out at the mall with his good friend Gyro after the attack on their class. He needed to go somewhere familiar to just forget about his near-death experience. UA was providing free counseling, mandatory, for all 1A students, but that wouldn't start up until school picked back up on Monday. Honestly, he was all for a 4-day weekend and all, but it wasn't worth getting attacked by villains. It'd been terrifying. And yet, here he was, again, being attacked by villains. Seriously, why? The mall was supposed to be safe. He wanted to cry. He played the good hostage along with Gyro, hoping that they'd make it out okay. In situations like this, it was bad to attack, right? because innocent people could be hurt. He didn't even know their quirks. Where were the heroes and cops? Weren't they supposed to be here already? Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I'm a little lost. Does anyone know where the bookstore is? The man asked. He wore a dark green, almost black jumpsuit, shirt, and pants? He couldn't tell, and had a mask that only revealed his green eyes. A utility belt hung on his thin frame, and he held himself with a casual air. Everyone turned to look at him, dumbfounded. Who the fuck are you? The man with white hands asked, glaring at the newcomer. Oh, me? Nobody special, he shrugged. Though, do you think you could take down that barrier? It's making it a little difficult to leave, you know. I don't think you understand the situation here, the one with purple hair glared. He'd been staying close to the third guy who'd been sitting still this whole time. You're going to sit down with everyone else and play the good hostage. If you don't, we'll start killing people. You know, as much as I'd love to, I really can't. You see, I have this little rule about not working with villains. Trust me, you're not the first to try. He smirked as he threw something at the purple-haired man, but the little beads froze midair. Hakugure Shikshore. Quirk, telepathy. You can control any objects or people and their placement in a 3-dimensional plane up to your physical weight limit. Roughly 429 pounds. Arrested alongside your brothers 2 years ago, broke out of prison 2 weeks ago. The man grinned. Hurugachi Kiroko. Quirk, hot hands. Not the most creative name, but you were what, 4.5? Your hands can expel heat up to 1,600 Fahrenheit, making you essentially capable of melting just about anything. Only your hands are immune to heat. He turned towards the last brother. Hukurogashi Neveru. Quirk, crystal barrier, hence your group name. Crystal Thieves. You can create a barrier of a certain radius that keeps people in or out as you choose. Selective, powerful. Such a shame you chose villainy. You could have made a great hero. He sighed. Who the fuck? Kuroku took a step back, eyes wide. No, I know you. Kuroku's eyes narrowed as he glared at the man. You're that vigilante! Veridian! A murmur swept through the crowd. Even Kaminari who knew who Veridian was. He was the not quite a hero, but still a hero vigilante that had taken the entire world by storm. First it was Japan, but after that video announcing his quirkless status. Isn't Veridian quirkless though? Kuroku huffed. It's just a quirkless freak. We can beat him. He rushed towards the vigilante with a confident grin. No, you idiot! Kuroku tried to stop his brother, but the other man swung at the vigilante. Veridian easily sidestepped the punch with a sort of grace Kaminari had never seen before. He grabbed the man by the elbow and pivoted so quickly that he almost didn't see it. The larger man hit the floor with a resounding boom, hands causing the tile to sizzle and pop as it melted under the extreme heat. Veridian quickly jumped back and dashed at the psychic, who held up his hands and levitated the vigilante. He'd been caught. Kuroku got to his feet with a sore groan, glaring at the vigilante. I wasn't going to tell you that Veridian has the record of Japan's most wanted vigilante. You can't get that title on stealth alone. He's got to have some kind of fighting prowess. He eyed the vigilante, who looked far too calm for his current situation. Though I must say, I'm not impressed. Who said I was trying to defeat you? Veridian smirked. Boom, he whispered, and a moment later there was a loud boom that sounded right next to the forgotten third brother's seat. The man jumped and toppled over with a startled yelp, allowing the barrier that kept the heroes and police at bay to shatter. No! Kuroku glared, lunging for the vigilante. A gunshot stopped the villain's advance as the police rushed onto the scene. Kaminari recognized several heroes, including the number 3 hero, Hawks. The winged hero rushed into the fight, taking out Kuroku with ease. Veridian, how do you keep getting into these messes? Hawks asked, a teasing tone in his voice. I'm just that talented, Birdie. Veridian grinned with an easy smirk. Trouble just loves me. Yes, well, you're still hurt. I'll have you know I've been treated at an actual hospital this time, so there. The vigilante seemed to stick out his tongue at the number 3 hero. Wow, that guy had guts. Veridian, how much extra paperwork did you cause me? A detective groaned as the police apprehended the criminals. Come on, Masa, I only borrowed some supplies from a few stores. You stole? To make a makeshift bomb! I had to distract him somehow. Kaminari stared. He planned that? All of that? You're giving us gray hairs, Hawks groaned. You know, I did originally come here to look at the books. Plus, I still need to pick up some groceries, so I'm gonna head out. Veridian waved a hand over his shoulder as he walked away. Just email me your statement, the detective sighed. Will do, Masa. Izuku wasn't ready. He stood before the doors of Class 1A. It was the first day back at school, and he was wondering how his classmates had taken everything. After all, the last time he'd seen them, he was being carted off to a hospital in critical condition after going toe-to-toe with a monster and the villain that had incapacitated their sensei. Yeah, he was gonna have a lot of bullshitting to do. With a deep breath, he opened the door to the classroom. At once, the students became silent as they looked at him. He supposed he was a bit of a sight for sore eyes. He sported a new scar on his left cheek that looked like he'd pissed off the wrong dude, armed with a switchblade, and his arm was still in a sling from his shoulder being partially disintegrated. Well, that, and he'd apparently stressed his shoulder with the mall incident, but that wasn't his fault, and he had to take the sling off to fight as Veridian. Yo, Midoriya, you're alive! Kirishima grinned as he jumped to his feet and ran over to meet him. I mean, I already told you I was alive via the chat, but... Izuku smiled at Kirishima. He was also glad to see Kaminari and Gyro were okay. He'd been worried because of the whole mall thing. Glad to see you're still up and about, Garu. You scared us. Suyu flashed him a grin. The fuck, Deku? Bakugo glared, getting to his feet. This is why you should never have become a hero. You can't do shit. Look at you. You're the only one of us that got hurt. He ignored Kirishima's attempt to calm him down and shrugged off Kaminari's hand. His eyes were set on Deku, whose face had become cool and detached. That's because I fought the ringleader. Sensei got hurt too, he pointed out. Yeah, but he took out dozens of villains alone. That's different. At least he's got a quirk. Bakugo, you will report to Nezu's office after school for detention. We do not tolerate bullying or quirk discrimination at UA. Do I make myself clear? Aizawa-sensei glared at the startled blonde as he came into the classroom. His mummified hand gently rested on Izuku's shoulder for the briefest of moments, and the Greenette instantly recognized it as a form of comfort from the antisocial man. Thank you, Sensei, Izuku quietly muttered to his teacher, who nodded gruffly. Okay, everyone to your seats. We've got homeroom. Everyone scrambled to take their seats, and Izuku reluctantly sat behind the fuming blonde. Part of him was pleased. He'd never, in any timeline, seen Bakugo get reprimanded for bullying or quirk discrimination before. It was satisfying, and honestly soothed a part of Izuku that had been bitter over everything the boy had said and done to him. He'd never forgotten when Bakugo had told him to kill himself. Right. First off, everyone will attend mandatory counseling with Hound Dog every week. Your personalized schedules will be emailed to you tonight, and effective immediately. This is not a setback. Do not feel discouraged at the nightmares or trauma. Every pro gets it. We've all got some form of PTSD. It comes with the job. Most don't get it so soon. If you need anything, you can come to any staff member. His eyes lingered on Izuku for a moment before he continued. That aside, we've got another matter to turn our gaze towards. The sports festival is coming, and you all need to prepare. This is no opting out. This is your best chance to catch the eye of the public and the pros. Internships will take place after the festival, so this is just your chance to shine. Plus ultra, or you might just end up losing your spot to someone in general education, he warned. Oh yeah, Kaminari spoke up. I remember hearing about that. Sometimes kids from other courses can be moved into the hero course if they do well enough. Yeah, and if hero kids suck enough, they can be moved out too, Gyro reminded him. I'm not done yet. Aizawa-sensei glared, activating his quirk for the briefest of moments, silencing the students instantly. Damn, that's a great intimidation tactic, Izuku idly noted. Due to this, your introductory course for heroics will be mostly self-study. If you want to use any school facilities after hours or on the weekends, please come to me. Now I'm done. He promptly curled up on his sleeping bag and drifted off to sleep. The class, now sufficiently distracted with the prospect of the festival, forgot to interrogate Izuku about the USJ incident, which was totally fine with him. Before leaving, Aizawa placed a note on Izuku's desk. He curiously unfolded it. Meet me in the classroom during lunch. That doesn't mean don't eat. We need to talk. Well, shit, Izuku grimaced. He was going to have a tough time with this one. He was lost in thought, and that was the first out of the room. He barely registered the group of students that crowded the 1A classroom moments later. Classes seemed to simultaneously drag out and rush past. Much to Izuku's dismay, there seemed to be some of his classmates let his workless status to the rest of the student body. Like they likely didn't know it was something he'd rather kept secret. A majority of them, particularly the general education kids, were pissed. Nobody was stupid enough to really do anything drastic, but he knew those glares, heard the whispers. He knew the notes would start soon too. His injuries from the USJ didn't help either. They made him look weak to them because only he, the quirkless heroic student, got hurt. But he ignored the jeers and glares with a practiced ease. It was something he'd had to deal with his entire life. Even when he went to trade school or when he was an adult with a good job, it was something he'd learned about to expect. He was smart enough to let the first go around and that the teachers didn't bully him, but his quirkless status kept him from receiving their protection. And as long as he'd done his work, his bosses really hadn't cared one way or another. The only time someone had been reprimanded was when they'd hurt Izuku badly enough that it impeded his job performance. In all honesty, Aizawa was the first teacher he'd ever had, the first person that'd spoken up against someone to defend him, and it made him feel good. He knew Yamada would probably speak up, maybe midnight, but he wasn't sure about any of the other teachers. Pro heroes or not, that doesn't mean they'd put a stop to it when he was quirkless. He'd known plenty of pros during the first run, how he'd decided to refer to the original timeline, that had promptly ignored him and his injuries or his need to be helped during filming attacks once they realized he didn't have a quirk. Izuku held little hope that many of these pros would be better. He really should have expected someone to shove him down those stairs as lunch started, but he thought that maybe these kids would wait a little longer with all the pros crawling around. He would have been fine if his arm hadn't been in a sling, but the restricting fabric kept him from catching himself, so he ended up eating shit face first into the tile at the bottom of the stairs. He heard several people chuckling, but he couldn't tell who had pushed him. The lingering students scattered fairly quickly, pretending not to see anything. With a sigh, Izuku pushed himself up and gathered his things. "Real mature," he muttered under his breath as he awkwardly hoisted his bag up over his uninjured shoulder again. He was a little surprised that nobody bothered to try and destroy his stuff or steal his backpack while it was unguarded, but he supposed that they'd pushed their luck enough doing this much in a school filled with heroes. He made his way into the bathroom to access the damage. He had a split lip and a darkening bruise on the left side of his face. He must have cut his eyebrow on the edges of the stairs because that was bleeding a bit too. Nothing broken, thank time. He washed off the dirt and finished out his portable first aid kit. As a vigilante and a quirkless guy, he'd learned early on to carry around any medical supplies he could. He checked his phone and huffed. He would be a little late to his meeting with Aizawa. Oh well, Sensei did help to learn to deal with this. He did tell me to eat after all. I wonder if eating shit down the stairs counts. He idly wondered aloud as he made his way to the classroom. "Midoriya, thank you for Aizawa stopped when he saw Izuku's face. "What happened?" "Fell down the stairs," he answered swiftly. "That's the oldest excuse in the book." Aizawa sent him a mild glare as Izuku closed the door. "Doesn't mean it's any less true." "Did you fall down the stairs, or did someone make you fall?" "I mean, I'm pretty sure someone pushed me, but I didn't see who." Izuku shrugged. No sense in lying to him any more than he had to. "It doesn't matter anyways." Aizawa looked like he really wanted to pinch the bridge of his nose. It does matter. That's bullying. And it's nothing I'm not used to. Honestly, I'm surprised nobody's left me. Izuku's eyes fell to his desk where he saw something barely poking out. Aizawa must have left the room to grab himself food because that had not been there when he left. Oh, never mind. Aizawa choked on his coffee when Izuku casually pulled out a red spider lily with a note attached that read, "Do us all a favor, Quirkless." Izuku admired the neat, flowery handwriting for a moment. They didn't even get the good kind of lily. They went to the cheap flower shop across town. He shook his hand as he offhandedly went to toss it in the trash. God, I'm going to go gray, Aizawa muttered under his breath. That is not okay. Hand it here and we'll figure out who sent it to you. They will be expelled and blacklisted. Izuku blinked at him dumbly for a moment as he handed over this Lillian note to his teacher. What's with that look? I've gotten hundreds of these before, and no teacher has ever bothered to do anything. I actually think one of them provided the vase for the bouquet for them once. I still have it. It's a pretty vase. Aizawa clenched his teeth and grumbled something that sounded like a long string of curse words under his breath. We aren't like your other teachers. This is not okay, Midoriya. Aizawa reminded him. You have earned your spot in UA. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Sorry, Sensei. I'm just used to this. This is normal for me, both in and out of school. People don't look at quirkless person the same way as they do everyone else. I'm lucky to be considered human half the time. Izuku decided to change the topic before it got too personal. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Firstly, I want you to promise that you'll bring any notes, threatening, and gifts to a staff member, preferably me if you get any more, and that you'll inform a staff member of any bullying. Izuku blinked. Sure, he knew that Shota hated bullying, but he hadn't expected him to be this up in arms about it. Sure, I promise. If it got a staff on his back, then he'd listen. I'm deceiving them enough already. I should just play along and let them know. Who knows, maybe the bullying will get better before it gets worse. Either way, either that or they'll retaliate outside of school grounds, but if they do that, then I can kick their butts and stick Kaigo on them. Izuku mentally grinned at that plan. Secondly, I know you withheld information when you were talking to Tsukuuchi about the USJ, Aizawa continued, and Izuku stiffened. You knew what the Nomu was before anyone had even seen it. You mentioned them during the flashback during the battle trials. Shit. Izuku cursed under his breath. Listen to me, Midoriya, and I need you to answer honestly. His voice became serious, and Izuku found himself mirroring his expression. Are you in any way, shape, or form being held hostage or blackmailed by villains? They think I'm the spy, and they're hoping it's unwilling. For a moment he considered playing on that route. It'd be far easier than believing this truth. No, Sensei. Izuku looked him dead in the eye. I'm not the traitor. I'm not your leak. Aizawa blinked in surprise for a moment. He probably hadn't expected Izuku to piece it together that fast. But you're right. I did already know about the Nomu because I encountered them before. That's why I knew how to kill them so quickly, compared to the ones I've seen. It was thin and gangly with a long whip-like tail for balance. The eyes were milky and sightless, and its elongated maw was lined with sharp teeth already stained red. Long arms ended in claws and legs bent backwards, giving it more power to jump and sprint. It was short in comparison to the rest of them, only about 6 feet tall, but it seemed to be covered in a layer of hard scales. Unlike the others, it had an exposed brain from the top. This Nomu's brain was only accessible from behind, and its most striking feature was that it was entirely white. Izuku was frozen in fear. The Nomu was sniffing the air, getting dangerously close to his hiding spot in the alleyway. He tried to stay calm, his racing heart quiet his breaths, but the fear made it nearly impossible. He was crouched behind an old overturned dumpster. The snout of the Nomu peeked from around the edge of his hiding spot when he felt his blood turn to ice. There was a ringing in his ears and his eyes blurred with tears. He could smell the Nomu's putrid breath, and he was close enough to see the bits of flesh and bone stuck in its razor-sharp teeth. It was close enough for him to reach out and touch, and he knew in that moment he was going to die. Its sightless white eyes seemed to bore into his skull. He would never see Hazashi or Nemura or Shota again. He would never get the chance to say goodbye to Dabi or Tamaki. He'd never. Izuku caught himself with the sight of a movement in the alleyway across from him. A man he'd never seen before stood there, terrified. He was taking advantage of the Nobu's interest in Izuku and made a break for it. The man shot up with such a speed that Izuku knew it was quick, but perhaps the only reason he'd made it this far. But the sound of his feet scraping on the gravel drew the attention of the white Nomu, and it whipped around from Izuku. Izuku stayed frozen as he watched in horror as the white beast moved with unbelievable speed. It caught up with to the speed quirk to man. Within seconds, of the man's anguished scream was cut off halfway when his head was bitten in two. He let out several tears run down his face, and he knew that man's stupidity was the only reason he was even still alive. Compared to what I've seen, that Nomu was incredibly tame. Izuku shuddered hard. He looked back up. When had he looked away? Compared to what you've... Midoriya, where have you seen these Nomu before? How many are there? He faltered for a moment. He'd already called him Problem Child. Was there a reason not to tell him? Why was he so scared? Because even if he knew, he's not your Shota, his mind reminded him, and he never will be. There are things I need to explain to you, Izuku finally decided. A hard steel in his voice that made Aizawa flinch back in surprise. To you, and Nezu, and probably Hisashi too. And you can't tell me now because... I just don't want to explain it more than once. Please, right now I need you to trust me. Alright, Aizawa relented. Is it okay if I explain after the sports festival? His teacher blinked in surprise. Is there any particular reason why? I need to figure out how I'm going to explain anything. It's a bit of a wild tale, to say the least. No offense, sir, but I wouldn't believe myself if I hadn't lived through it. Aizawa sighed, nearly whacking himself in the face with his cast when he went to pinch the bridge of his nose on reflex. Izuku held back a snort to save his blushing teacher some dignity. Alright, I'll set up the appointment with Nezu. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei. Also, his tone became even more serious. If Izuku thought it was possible. What you did at the USJ was stupid and irresponsible. Your reckless act put your life in danger, and that is not how a hero acts. Izuku went to protest, but was cut off with a quirk-enhanced glare. However, Aizawa continued, your reckless behavior was also saved my life. He then bowed to Izuku for a moment before straightening up. Thank you, Midoriya Izuku. Though I'd rather you hadn't put yourself in harm's way under the circumstances, I can understand it. And thanks to you, I'm able to reprimand you for being an idiot. He then averted his gaze and flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry for taking up your lunch period like this. Izuku stared for a moment before he felt a giant grin spread on his face. He couldn't remember the last time he'd smiled so brightly. I'm just glad you're okay, Sensei. He then, against his better judgment, hugged Aizawa. The man stiffened for a moment before ultimately allowing it and reciprocating as much as he could. You just wanted to make sure I was safe. Nothing wrong with that. Izuku then pulled away. I'm gonna go get ready for class. Please tell me you ate something other than the staircase. God damn it, Problem Child. Izuku laughed. Aizawa Shota was a lot of things right now. He was in pain, he was tired, he was annoyed, but most of all, he was concerned for Midoriya Izuku, someone he'd recently taken to calling Problem Child, and his Problem Child was a Rubik's Cube of mysteries. During the USJ incident, as the staff had taken to calling it, he'd thought the name Nomu sounded familiar, but in the chaos of everything, he hadn't been able to place it. He remembered watching in transfixed horror as Midoriya had fought against the monster, and he was sure he'd soon witness his student's untimely death. He had tried to stagger to his feet, but his broken body would just not listen to him. And then Midoriya had somehow managed to kill it. Shota had no idea how the kid had managed to move behind it that fast, and he had no clue how his student had survived being thrown into the nearby fountain, but he was glad he'd managed it. Oh, how Shota had wanted to reprimand the bat for purposefully taunting the villain, Shigaraki, the same name of Shigaraki Tomura that Veridian was after. The utter relief that had he felt upon realizing backup had arrived nearly had him pass out. He'd vaguely recognized his husband's voice and turned to glare at him for keeping him awake. At the time, he hadn't fully registered his concussion and had just wanted to sleep. Later, at the hospital, Hawks of all people burst in the door. Shota had been completely floored seeing the normally laid-back and aloof hero so frantic. He was genuinely concerned for this kid in class that he should have no way of knowing. Shota didn't fully buy the villain estimate. Sure, Tsukuchi didn't detect a lie, but Shota had made sure to thoroughly check the background of all his students. Midoriya had no recent hospital visits or trauma reports, a requirement of after being attacked by any villain, so they were as either lying or as close to lying as they could get without setting off Tsukuchi's lie detector, or Hawks had somehow failed to follow the protocol for some reason. But Shota's research brought him up for something else. Midoriya hadn't been to the hospital since he was 4. Since he was pronounced quirkless, that set off several alarm bells for the hero, who quickly shared his findings with Nezu and Tsukuchi, the latter so he could look into things on his end. Maybe the kid was accused, but he told Tsukuchi he was safe at home. Was home with someone else? The streets? God, he hoped not. It wasn't until after he'd released from the hospital that Shota recalled when he'd last heard the name Nomu before. During Midoriya's flashback during All Might's first class, he'd mentioned hearing Nomu around them, which meant that he'd encountered them before, which also meant that there were more than one. He'd taken this information to Nezu immediately, and the principal had confessed his suspicions of Midoriya being their lead. The thought made Shota simultaneously angry and heartbroken. He'd been growing attached to this brat, whether he wanted to admit it or not. The fact that he was likely a traitor. But hold on, Aizawa, Nezu said, stopping him from leaving. There's one more to my theory. Oh? A ray of hope. I think that if he is the traitor, he is being held captive by the League of Villains. I'm a very objective character, and I don't think he truly wants to hurt any of us. I truly believe that if he is the traitor, it's against his will. After that, Nezu told him that he felt his heart lighten a bit, even if the thought of Midoriya at the hands of villains made him cringe. That was why he asked him to meet during the lunch break. Asking him to stay after school would raise suspicions if their hunch was correct, and damn had that conversation taken a lot of energy from Shota. By the end of it, he felt as emotionally drained and battered as his body, which was saying something considering he was currently living on Skull Crusher coffee mixed with energy drinks and caffeine powder. If Recovery Girl found out, he'd be skinned. He re-entered the staff room to find Hisashi and Nemuri there. Thank God. Sho? Are you okay? You look like shit. Hisashi's eyes shone in concern. God, I want to kill somebody, but I don't have the energy to do it, he moaned, burying his face in his husband's shoulder. Okay, what's up? Hisashi's tone was uncharacteristically serious. Midoriya is getting bullied. Badly. The kid walked into our meeting with a beat-up face because someone shoved him down the stairs. What? Nemura and Hisashi cried at the same time. Don't get me started on the no, Shota growled. Just thinking about how casually Midoriya had tried to throw away that lily, someone left an actual death threat in his desk, and the kid was so used to it that his first reaction was to criticize where they got their supplies before attempting to throw it away. Shota's voice was rising now, but he didn't really care. He pulled away from Hisashi as he angrily paced and said, and then when I actually intervened and told him that the person responsible would be expelled, he looked at me like I had thrown a second ahead before explaining that his previous teachers had ignored or encouraged such behavior. Encouraged! If his hands weren't already casted, Shota would be pulling his hair right now. He says it's normal for him, that he's looking for people to look at him as a human being. He stopped, suddenly out of breath and even more exhausted than before. Hisashi cautiously approached him. It wasn't often that Shota lost his cool, but when he did, it was typically explosive. Nemuri stared at him with wide eyes, having only seen him a handful of times. It's alright, Sho. We'll bring it up at the teachers' meeting today, and figure out who sent it. He helped Shota sit back down on the couch. We'll help the little listener. Someone's attached, Nemuri smirked. Shota would have normally declined it, but that would require entry he no longer had, so he opted for glaring at his friend and said, You look beyond exhausted, Sho. Hizashi helped him climb into his yellow sleeping bag. Take a nap. I'll wake you later. He sent his husband a mild glare, but he was never one to pass up a nap. And he must have looked really bad if he was actually encouraging Shota's shitty sleeping habits for once. He half-heartedly muttered something of some sort of semblance of good night before he slipped into his nightmares again. Nezu was many things. He was a creature of unknown genetic makeup. He was incredibly intelligent, more so than most humans. He was the maker of millions of plants. But lately he'd found himself encountering something entirely new to him. Nezu was confused, and it all came back to one Midoriya Izuku, first quirkless student of UA. The kid was the biggest and most convoluted puzzle Nezu had ever had the pleasure of coming across. The more he tried to figure out about the boy, the more mismatched the puzzle pieces he'd found. It was like trying to solve a two-sided puzzle, but only half of the pieces were colored in. And just when he thought he'd finally solved it, the image was wrong, and he realized it was a three-sided puzzle. Nezu wasn't used to headaches either. He sat down in his chair during the staff meeting room. Aizawa had wanted to report a case of severe bullying in the school, and such cases were taken with the utmost seriousness. Alright, Aizawa, what's the situation? Powerloader asked, concern lacing his voice. Bullying wasn't a common occurrence in UA at all, mostly because of how harshly they were punished for such actions. That, and many weren't stupid enough to carry out such actions in a hero school. Midoriya Izuku, Aizawa started, and Nezu fought the urge to smash his skull into the table. As you know, he's quirkless, Aizawa continued, and several of the staff nodded grimly, seeing where this was going. It appears that the rest of the school found out, too. I had a meeting with the kid at lunch today, and he walked into the classroom with half his face black and blue. Someone pushed him down the stairs, but he claimed he never saw who it was. He came and saw me after school, Recovery Girl spoke up. I have some pictures of the damage done. She passed around some photos of the student's bruised face. Nezu would definitely be going over the security footage tonight. There's more, Aizawa continued, and the staff looked over in disbelief. It gets worse than shoving a kid down the stairs, Cementos choked out. For a moment, Aizawa's eyes flashed red in anger, and Nezu knew he wasn't gonna like this. He found this in his desk. He's apparently so used to it that he just throws them away. He says this is the first one he's found at UA. He then proceeded to pull out a red spider lily. Several of the staff gasped in shock. There was also this note. If you recognize this handwriting, please let me know. If Nezu was angry before, he was furious now. As confusing as Midoriya was, he was still a person who interested him. It was rare for Nezu to find people that could hold intellectual conversations with him in the way that Midoriya could, and the fact that Nezu couldn't figure him out only made him much more intriguing. To put it simply, Midoriya was Nezu's puzzle, and nobody hurt what belonged to Nezu. I've gone ahead and held him and promised to tell me if anything occurs like this again. He told me that his previous school encouraged the bullying, and even mentioned that a previous teacher provided a vase for the lilies. We need to show him that teachers can be trusted. Oh boy. Vlad rubbed his temples. On another note, Aizawa looked at Nezu, who nodded. You asked him then? He said he wasn't our leak. He told me he knew what the Nomu was because he's encountered them before. He had a brief flashback that leads me to believe that he's telling the truth. So we're back at square one. Wait, you mean you thought the little listener was the traitor? We thought that he might be an unwilling accomplice of villains, possibly blackmailed or held captive, Aizawa sighed. But it appears that my hunch was wrong, Nezu chimed in. Several of the staff members blinked at him in shock. He's truly an interesting puzzle. I've never had someone quite as perplexing as him before. His mind flashed to the rings that he'd handed back to the child. They were undoubtedly the wedding bands of Yamada Hizashi and Aizawa Shota, but he knew for a fact that both teachers were wearing said rings around their necks right now. The custom brands were nearly impossible to replicate by professional means, let alone for a child who'd never seen them before. The engravings inside the bands were on point too. This only had made him even more confused. He didn't like the feeling. I don't believe Midoriya Izuku is a danger to us or UA, Nezu finally said, and several staff members relaxed. If anything, I think he's trying to help us somehow. I went back over the footage from the USJ cameras and managed to salvage some of the audio. From what I gathered, Midoriya did everything in his power to protect the other students and his teachers. The villain, Shigaraki Tomura, did not seem to recognize Midoriya at all, even though Midoriya seemed to recognize him on sight. I'm getting confused, Midnight sighed. Several of the other staff members muttered to their neighbors as well. In short, I believe Midoriya is not a danger to us or the school. If anything, he is trying to help us. He's someone we need to protect, Nezu said, earning nods from the staff. The principal decided that it was time for tea, and quickly made himself a pot. He sat back down in his chair, and he pulled out a bottle of rum. He then added rum, a bit of honey, and a spritz of lemon into his cup before pouring tea over the top. He took a nice long sip and relaxed into his chair. Principal Nezu, Toshinori asked, eyeing the alcohol warily. Are you okay? The room had gone quiet. Midoriya Izuku is quite confusing, Nezu started, and I find rum helps me get rid of headaches. The staff stared. You're confused? Kaguri choked. Yes, I am. And if he smiled behind his teacup as the staff collectively lost it, well, at least he was entertained now. He could think about Midoriya tomorrow. And that was Chapter 12, Confusion of Lies of Veridian by Silver Mist Anime Lover. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a comment down below. I love reading the comments. They always make my day. Have a nice time wherever you are. Bye!